Hi, this is Forrest Messenger coming to you on what I believe are going to be a series of videos I'm going to do about my faith in Christ. And I'm going to start out today by just providing a background on how I became a Christian, which in Christianese is called my testimony. But what it is it's the story of my spiritual journey to become a Christian, which was, in my case, anything but straightforward. When I was 6 years old, my dad left my family, uh, and I didn't know why. My sister knew the story, but I had no idea why. My mom ended up marrying a musician hippie a couple years later, and we were probably below the poverty line. And my dad, in his case, had a very good career. He had a master's, and he had an MBA, and he had a BS in library science, and a really secure job. And he liked to spend money, and he had a real nice lifestyle. And he lived in Tustin. We lived in the city of Orange, not too far from him, and I would see him every couple of weeks. And I had a great deal of admiration for him. He was very organized and kind of a concrete, sequential thinker, which is really the way I'm wired. That's why I'm an accountant now. But um, that's kind of neither here nor there. But I just really admired him. I admired his lifestyle. I admired the fact that he seemed to be able to buy whatever he wanted, uh, I'm very much like him in terms of my personality and thought processing style. So he was really my hero. And I only saw him every couple of weeks, and at the time as a kid I was a classic Ritalin child, very hyperactive, really bright but very hyperactive, needed Ritalin to stay calm, and Dad was a very strict disciplinarian, and he gave me the boundaries I needed, whereas my mom and my stepdad, they were more laid back, and I loved the discipline I got from my dad as a kid. When I was 15, a huge shift happened in that relationship. 4 years earlier, my dad had moved from Southern California up to the Bay Area, so only saw him about every 3 or 4 months or so on holidays and summer vacations. But I was on a summer vacation with my dad, and uh, kid I called a cousin, but he was really my godmother's son, who informed me that the reason my dad left my family when I was 6 was because he was gay. I was extremely rattled and shaken by this. I had, between the time I was 15 and when my dad left, had become a regular church attender in the Episcopalian Church and later in the Catholic Church, and took myself to church. I was involved in the adult choirs because I could sing well, and I was a tenor, sang tenor in the adult choir, and loved to go to church. Never read a Bible. The only Bible I ever heard was what I heard in church, and I, uh, distinctly remember when I was about 12 or 13 going and meeting with a priest and wondering, how do you become a priest? How do you know you're called to become a priest? And he couldn't really give me a definition I could understand at the time. He just said, you feel the calling, and I was just like, well, that's kind of vague. But um, knowing Catholic theology well now, I understand that, he couldn't tell me, well, you need to be born again to become a Christian. But anyway, we'll get to that later. So my reaction to finding out my dad was gay was that I got involved in the occult because my mom was into metaphysics, and I basically did a complete tailspin. I was just in shock. I was completely embarrassed and humiliated by this. I realized that, oh, my dad's friend that he's been living with is his gay partner, and he did some stuff with me that wasn't appropriate, and I felt ashamed about myself that I had, basically been masturbating with this guy, because he made me do it. It was a creepy thing, and I forgive him and everything. But at this point, it's not something you do with a kid, and it was inappropriate. And so, but as a 15-year-old, I just internalized this, and I thought there was something inherently wrong with me that this happened to me, and I became depressed, and I started looking for answers outside the Catholic Church, and that came in the form of the occult because my mom was involved with metaphysics. She took me to a metaphysical center in Orange County, and I went to a seance with her. And this black lady was a medium, and she channeled a spirit. And I literally watched her channel this spirit. I watched her head spin around, and this green haze, like kind of a neon green haze, surrounded her head. And all of a sudden, she was embodied by some other spirit. And I watched this happen before my eyes, and the physical manifestation of it that I know it was real was I have a scar here on my hand. It's really hard to see at this point in time, but that day, the day that I went to the metaphysical center and went to that seance with her, I fell off my skateboard and gashed my hand open. I mean, it was a kind of gash that could have used a couple stitches. We just band-aided it over because we still were relatively, our family was frugal. My stepdad had a good job at this time, but anyway, our family was frugal, so we just band-aided over it. I went to this seance, and once this lady channeled this spirit, my hand completely healed over. No scab, nothing, just the small scar from the gash. And I was, from that point on, hooked by the intrigue, the interest of the occultic powers. And I started reading books like Carlos Castaneda, Baba Ram Dass, who was a white guy who became a kind of a Buddhist guru to, hip Americans at the time, and some other avenues. I read a lot of books by a guy named Aleister Crowley, who was the founder of the Satanist movement in the United States. I didn't know he was a Satanist per se. I called it the occult. And so I started down this journey, and I was also using marijuana, and after a year started using LSD, because marijuana and LSD opened up the spirit realm to me, and I felt these spirits around me, and I felt the spiritual power come on me, and I started practicing witchcraft. I started using tarot cards, cast some spells on a guy that my mom, a younger guy that was carrying on with my mom at the time, and I cast spells on him, and some weird stuff happened to him. So there was real power manifestation through my occult experiences, and I was involved with this with a friend of mine named Stephen in the occult stuff, and we both were going in this direction, and then one day we kind of regularly did acid the last year I was involved with drugs, which was when I was 17, and we decided, well, let's take some LSD and let's sit in a yoga posture and close our eyes and see what happens. So I did this, and I found that I was being pulled down a tunnel towards a light at the end of this tunnel. And I saw images of my life passing me along this tunnel, past memories and stuff. Now, up until this day when this happened, I felt like I was becoming some kind of enlightened master. That was my path, from guys like Carlos Castaneda, who talked about, the Indian tradition of peyote dropping and being in touch with the spirits, how, it's really popular right now to encourage people to accept the First Nations peoples of different countries and all their crazy religions that used to follow. But they had human sacrifice stuff among the Maoris, among the people in Papua New Guinea, among the people in Mexico. Nobody ever talks about that. Nobody talks about the American Indians are all killing each other, tribal warfare all the time. It's just, oh, the white man took advantage of them and did this evil thing. It's like, I'm not excusing any of that behavior, but I'm just saying that these people were not innocent First Nations people that we should now follow their example in their religious traditions. So, because what I experienced that day completely changed my world. This was without any kind of a Christian background other than going to church and being really religious, but never reading the Bible, not really knowing what was in there. So I got pulled down this tunnel towards this light, and it was like, as I got towards the light at the end of this tunnel, it was like I was heading towards kind of a loud Niagara Falls. There's this roaring sound that just got louder and louder, and the light became larger and more all-encompassing until finally I entered the light. And there was this complete calm and peace, an experience of love that just permeated every pore of my body. But another thing that was frightening and vulnerable about the experience was that in this light and love was truth. It didn't exist in a separate way. It was all part of the same thing that I experienced, and I could see that my character was evil, that this person that I saw myself as this person who was becoming this enlightened being was not enlightened, that I had broken universal law and I was guilty for it, and that I was dirty, that my character was dirty. I mean, it's really a weird experience, but so tangible and so real. And then I turned around in this place I was in, and there were 24 guys. And I had this download of information that these were not just spirits that never existed on earth. These were men who were in a glorified state, who had authority over me, and I was accountable to them somehow. That they had the right to judge me for what my character was. And once I had this download of information, they called me by name. They said, "Forrest, are you ready to be dealt with? Or do you want to complete what you've left unfinished?" And I said to them, "Well, obviously, if I'm dealt with for my character right now, as it is, I'm toast. So I need to go back." And they're like, "You're right." And like that, I was back in my body, and I was stone cold sober 2 hours into an LSD trip. If you've ever done LSD, you know that you're ridiculously high for 8 to 10 hours. If you've never done LSD, it's like being awake. Imagine being awake during a dream. That's what it's like. So I looked at my friend Stephen, and I was like, wow, what was that? And I know to this day, because of where he is in his life, that he didn't have the same experience that I did. He didn't have the near-death experience that I had. About a week or two later, I was doing a pentagram ceremony that I read about in one of the Aleister Crowley books I had. And suddenly a spirit about 3 feet tall showed up in my room, about 10 feet from me. And what this guy looked like was a medieval peasant, dressed in like a midget, dressed in medieval peasant garb. And he spoke to me just like those 24 guys up in that, what I now know was heaven, was like. He spoke to me the same way they were able to, and he said, "Hey, I'm a spirit guide, and I want to enter you, and I want to control and direct your life." Now, this spirit was not, I didn't experience the love and the peace and the light and the truth out of this spirit. This spirit was different. This spirit was dark. He was the embodiment of evil, and I knew it. And what was unique about this experience was, because I had been to the Indian occult and I was into all this Zen stuff and all this groovy, like just there's good in light and there's light and there's bad in good and all this stuff. I was confused about what was right and wrong, but I knew without a shadow of a doubt this was a completely evil presence, spirit, and he was real. He was a person. He was a spirit, and he was utterly evil. And something inside me said, this spirit is real. He's a person. He has a will. And if he's real, God has to be real. And I said a simple prayer that day. I said, God, please help me get off drugs and find you. And like that, the evil spirit was gone. And a week later, after using drugs every day for 2 years, every single day, I got clean. That's all I'm going to share for now. I'll follow up next time. Thanks for listening.